Hello, everyone. This is Sarah Poet. It is so good to be here with you today. And it has been coming to me to talk about feminine leadership and the evolution of feminine leadership. So, when I'm getting that signal, I just have to go on and do it. So, thank you for joining me. And as I begin to talk about this, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to just break this down into three parts for us to conceptualize. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I also want you to remember that no human, no person is an archetype, right? So the things that I'm saying in order for us to glean a picture of what I'm talking about is not saying that any one person has to be this exactly or fit into this exactly. But really, what I want to speak to today is this evolutionary arc of feminine leadership and some of what is happening present time on the planet right now, because it's really important for us to grok this information, for us to have this in our consciousness. And there's a lot going on that we may be seeing and we might have kind of like a reaction to. You don't know what's true, what's not true. Hopefully this video here today will help you to discern. So I'm Sarah Poet. I have worked in the space of reunifying feminine and masculine for full time for 7 years. Before that, I've been walking the spiritual path for a long time. And I help women to walk this pathway and to dismantle patriarchy within us, right? So when I left my full time established career as a holistic school creator and school principal, I went out onto this path with faith, not knowing exactly what I would find. And I remember standing in my kitchen one day very early on this soulpreneur journey. And it was like, wow, I was having the realization like, wow, I am really not allowed to do the things that would have me participate in a sort of traditional patriarchal energetics anymore. And so that has been true. That has been my soul's guidance. And I have walked this path of looking at what it would look like to do it differently and then dismantling everything from, my own trauma, the somatic experience of my own trauma, to the what I call the false feminine and false masculine archetypes within me. And, like all of the unhealthy projections that you could have. I've probably explored it, probably did a lot of it, made a lot of mistakes myself, in order to glean what was not true, right? In order to find what is more true. And I know that so many of us are on that path right now. Like, it's not particularly special. I do think it's special that we commit to this path, but I don't think it's particularly special that like every one person's journey is very, very important, very, very special to the whole. Maybe not unique is what I'm saying. So, but maybe I don't need to diminish it. Maybe it's like super awesome and super unique. I think it probably is, because I'm going to be speaking to some things that are pretty cutting edge here today. So, yeah, that's the path I came to walk and what I came to share back. So enough of that. I want to get into this three parts. Okay. I'm going to break down feminine leadership in three parts. I am going to be talking about women, but men, just ask yourself how this applies to you. There's going to be plenty of applications. You're very smart. You can apply this to your life. So, women, I'm particularly speaking to us right now. So, the first, like the very basis, when I say feminine leadership, the very base definition that we could maybe have is a woman in a position of leadership, right? A woman in position of leadership. But I'm going to keep this part one real short, because I think we all know women who are in positions of leadership who don't necessarily behave in a feminine way. Now, I'm going to talk about the archetypes. So, if you're already starting to get a little ruffled about the words that I'm using, that's fine. We can disagree. Just stick with me. So, I've had like female bosses, well, and I worked in leadership, like I was in school leadership. The way that we climb the career ladders traditionally, historically, is to actually emulate what men in masculinity have looked like in the workplace. So that is how women came to even have like the equity, the equality that we even have in the workplace, is that we had to compete with men who had already laid this particular groundwork and framework. And then we came in and we said, well, we're going to try to compete with that. We're going to get into that like already established game, already established groove, right? And many women are very good at playing that game. But just because there's a female in a position of leadership, like think politicians, doesn't necessarily mean that they're incorporating very feminine archetypes, right? So we're going to move on to stage 2 here. Just one is pretty basic, right? All right. So when we want to do feminine leadership and actually incorporate the feminine archetype, then we start to kind of get curious. And I'm just kind of like laughing in my head right now, because when I started this work full time 7 years ago, like we weren't even having this conversation. I was like alone in in this conversation. When I did my TEDx on this topic, I felt like it was kind of career suicide, but my intuition was like, keep going. So intuition, that's like a gateway, right? So when we as women start to want to rely on our intuition, on our gut feelings, on like our senses, like when I became a mother and I was an educator, I made a lot more decisions in education based on my maternal knowing, right? So now I'm starting to bring in some feminine archetypal qualities and characteristics, right? So when we want to lead or create a business, or lead others or lead ourselves with more of an incorporation of the feminine archetype, then we're going to begin to think more holistically. And this is where you see a trend. It's a very good thing, very good sign toward like holism, right? Bringing your whole self to work, denying nothing. A lot of my clients over the years feel like they have one foot in one world, one foot in the other. Like you are performing this at work, being how you need to be performative at work, but then you might have like some kind of inclination or awakening or sacred feminine experience, but you feel like you can't really share that between worlds. I felt like that too, and that's why I just like had to go all in this path that I took, right? So we want to begin to feel that holism, like not deny the intuition, like we start to give it credit. We want others to do that too. Like you don't want to just sit, in the meetings and only regurgitate what the data says or what the research says. Like you want to start bringing forward your other ways of knowing. So as feminine leaders, we do that in like the way we treat teams, the way we treat, time, wellness, right? This, and I'm going to keep using the word holistic because I think that's a pretty good indicator of when actually what's happening is the feminine archetype is coming back. You can't deny it on the planet. This is the consciousness evolution that's happening on the planet, is that the feminine and the masculine must rebalance now. So we're going to find these different ways to incorporate it as humans and as workers and as leaders, right? That like makes sense for our bodies, for how we want to feel, and like what we want our workplaces and our businesses to feel like. And I would say at this stage, you also start to incorporate a noticing and a respect for energy. Like in stage 1, anything that's feminine, cyclical, hormonal, holistic inside of your being, you are squashing that so that you can get the job done, right? So in what I'm going to call like stage 2 of this, you start to pay attention to, if I override what my body says every single day in order to get the job done, my hormones are completely imbalanced. I'm very sad. I'm not having a good time and I want to leave the situation, right? So a lot of women are opting out, like they're opting to leave the traditional workplace because these things aren't quite realized yet. So anytime we're beginning to prioritize our like energy as women and how we actually feel, that's an indicator of feminine leadership, right? We are taking a stand for the feminine archetype to be incorporated. And we're not just playing along with previous systems. We're not just going along with what has already been laid out in, quite frankly, a male dominated and an industrial sort of way. The biggest indicator to know, well, one of the biggest indicators of your relationship with the feminine is your relationship with productivity, like hardcore productivity. And there's an arc that goes to more creativity in a very organic sense. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. But, in stages 1 and 2, we're at this place where, like, we've been taught to be very, very productive. We use our energy to be very productive, to get a task done. This is how it has been in like the past many decades of the industrial world, right? Of the work world. So the values that were in place in that realm were very productive, like get the job done, check the boxes, produce so that you have a profit, right? And it didn't quite matter what was in the way, like whether it be someone's energy, whether it be ethics, whether it be like the state of the environment, like it was just like, we're going to plow through and not consider the whole. So we were all born into that. We all kind of adopted that in our ways of work. And our relationship, each and every single one of us, regardless of gender, our relationship with productivity is very much going to be an indicator of where you are on this arc, because the true feminine, she's going to get stuff done. Don't worry. She's highly creational. She's very smart. She's not going to buy into productivity for productivity's sake anymore. All right. So one other thing I want to mention, because I see it out here. Still in this like stage 2, pardon me, of, women remembering the feminine. So I have a podcast called Sacred Remembering, right? When we are remembering the feminine, we're like, hang on, we tried to erase this. We tried to erase this half of all of the energetics of the whole world. And I'm not okay with it anymore. And I'm not okay with how it impacted me, right? So that's an awakening. That's what I call an awakening. Welcome. So, we begin to look at like, well, what is this feminine archetype and how do I get it back? And I'll just take a moment for kind of a funny story. So I met a woman who was like, it was through another contact. So she didn't know my work. And I started to talk through our working together. I started to talk about feminine and masculine archetypes. And she was like, oh my gosh, it totally changed. It changed her life. Like, but it just started to change her outlook. So much self-awareness, so much of like why she was dissatisfied and, leaning toward addictions and escapism and all of that was just so exemplified. So much about sexuality, everything about her history. She was like, oh my gosh, the light bulbs are going off, right? Like we were totally meant to meet. And so I was talking to her about feminine and masculine energy. And then she goes, okay, on her own, goes off into the world and starts to just like Google the sacred feminine. And she starts to listen to these meditations, and she comes back to me and she was like, but wait, this meditation over here doesn't particularly make me feel good. And like, she had landed in new age spirituality, feminine, masculine. And then she was like, well, I feel confused. So that to say, it can get very confusing, because when we start to have an awareness, then we go looking around the internet and looking around at what other people are doing, and we try a lot of things on. So, with all due respect to everyone on their path, I'll just name that this for me, this like new age reclamation of the feminine, it's not there yet. Okay, so here's where you hear a lot about feminine archetypes. You hear a lot about spiritual practices like tarot. Women think that reclaiming the moon is reclaiming the feminine. It's not. Like, think about what the moon is. The moon revolves around something. It's like completely dependent on the sun's energy. And women, are you saying that you're completely dependent on the masculine's energy? Like, it's not empowering, right? So there's like this pseudo empowerment. And I'm truth telling right now. And I don't mean to, make any like enemies in doing so. But I really do feel the need to speak to this more, because it's so wonderful that women are remembering the feminine and remembering this like path of creation. But we have to continue our remembrance path until we are really understanding. Well, I don't know that we could ever fully grok the mysteries of the entire creation, but like, we are looking at this, until we are looking at this from a creational standpoint. Okay, from a creational standpoint. Oftentimes, between stage 2 and stage 3, there's a lot of this reclamation energy going on. A lot of like, fuck, they took that from me. I gotta get it back, right? So that creates opposition. Right in there, we have a lot of trauma healing to do as women. We have a lot of just remembrance, and really relying on our own ability and capacity to have this sacred remembering experience, as I call it. So, sacred remembering is women stepping into the truth of who we are. We are awakening, we are stepping into that truth. That truth is not defined outside of yourself. It is not defined by what was taken from you. It is not defined by the systems that you feel that you have to fight against. That's not who you are. There is a being inside of you, this essence of creation that is you, that is inside of you. That is what we are remembering, right? So here we go into stage 3, which is far more exciting. So stage 2, yeah, like, we're on our way. And stage 3 in the evolution of feminine leadership is actually standing in your own personal leadership. It is doing what you are here on the planet to do. It is fully recovering both feminine and masculine, so that you move into a place in your heart where you're not mad and traumatized anymore. I mean, that takes a long time, right? I don't know that we're ever like fully not mad or fully not traumatized, but like, we're mostly back in the heart, right? Like, this is really a journey of the heart, and it is really a journey of union. And I will be doing more podcasts on that. So tune into the Sacred Remembering podcast. There are already 180 episodes there. So there's plenty for you on your Sacred Remembering path. But what we're doing is remembering and walking toward a unified creation. So everything that we've made, including businesses, including ways of work, all of that, politics, education, all the systems that are currently existing has been built within a fallen template, a divided and ununified template, where there were these distortions about what feminine and masculine even were. The feminine was suppressed, taken from, extracted from. The masculine was like shot into this domination sort of archetype that's not actually authentic, right? So we have false templates at play currently on the planet. So the ways of work, when I became an entrepreneur after being a school principal, school creator, I was so innovative the whole time, right? I was like, I'm going for it. I'm going for this entrepreneurship. Mistakenly, even though I was on the soul path, even though it was very much aligned for me to be doing that, what was not aligned was for me to adopt existing frameworks for how we do business or how we do coaching, right? So at first I adopted it because I thought that's what you did. And I went with kind of like a coach that seemed pretty like woke, but it was all this new age manifestation shit that like, it's not built in a solid template, right? So that didn't work. So I had to get out of that, like dismantle that as well. If I can save you any time in doing that, that would be a priority of mine. So we need women standing in the truth of who we are. But here's the point. This is the third tier. We are going to be remembering and intuiting new ways of work, new ways of doing things, and new information. We are not meant to fit inside of existing templates. I could go on and on about this. The feminine is not made to fit into boxes. The feminine is not made to fit into false structures. This is what doesn't feel good. This is what we are pissed about. Okay. This is what we are trying to deal with in like thousands of different ways, and we don't quite know how, right? Well, I'm here. I'm a helper for you on this path if there's resonance here. And I make it a specific point to name these things that are going on. So it does you no good. It does the world no good, you and the world, to turn down the truth of who you actually are and this sacred feminine incorporation of who you actually are, and like go to work and get the job done and be productive. It does you no good to step onto a path of soul entrepreneurship and just tuck into existing frameworks. It's going to squelch all that you are meant to bring. So here's where we're not only bringing forward our intuition, but we're bringing like the full ways of feminine knowing that we have now cultivated. If you have not yet cultivated them, I have. So part of what I do for women is to actually channel between, this soul creation of yours. So your soul is talking to the soul of the business. You know that you're supposed to start this. You know that you're called to do this. And I can help facilitate a higher level of conversation between, you could say, your soul and the soul of the business. But really what it is, it's bigger than soul. It's the creational template of you and the creational template of the business. So let me just talk about this creational template for just a little bit longer, and then we will be finished. So this is what we are reclaiming on the planet, the creational template. If you want to know what feminine and masculine are, go sit in the woods. Don't look at another Instagram influencer trying to tell you how the sacred feminine acts or what human behavior is feminine. Just stop, okay? That's still all within kind of like this fallen structure and people trying to figure out what's what, okay? So nature is our teacher. Nature, creation itself, it wasn't corrupted. Nature didn't sign up for like, patriarchal influence. It's still nature. So if we want to really learn about feminine, masculine, how they cooperate, we need to actually get into right relationship again with nature itself. Okay. So I'll let you ponder that, because it's nothing that I could summarize within like just a few moments here, right? But it just takes all of the overlay and washes it away when we just give it all back to creation itself. That is the walk of humanity right now, even though things look so disruptive and there are so many examples of human beings maybe getting it quote unquote wrong. Podcast episode 180 that I just recorded was, we can look at all of those things and react, but when we give our life force to that, it doesn't create anything new. So in stage 3 of this evolutionary process that I'm painting today, we are stepping into a new level of creation, a new, like, we are actually bringing new information forward. My friends and I, we are channels. We are reading the energies of the planet. We are reading the energies of the collective. We are doing the grid work, right? Because the planet is changing as the humans are changing. We're doing it in tandem. But I only know this because I said yes to my sacred remembering path and continued to lean into the feminine ways of knowing, so that I could get to the place of actually knowing what I am meant to bring forward onto this planet. So let me say that again. So I had this hunch like 6, 7, 8 years ago that I was to leave education and do this and become like a quote unquote women's coach, right? What I have learned about like actual creation and actual soul and the actual path between then and now is, I cannot even describe it to you. It's like a different life. It's like you wouldn't have even, I would have never known. If I would have stayed in education, I would have never known. So when I say that the answers to where we're going are currently inside of women, and this is why I do what I do, I know that it's true because I've lived this path. There's a dormancy of, I'm going to use a super woo word here. There's a dormancy of code. It's like written in your DNA. They say that there's junk DNA. I don't think there's junk DNA. I think there's dormant DNA. And this DNA has very, very historic information. And if you are someone who is on the earth at this time, and then you're someone who is actually walking a brave awakening path at this time, there is this new, unique code. It's like ancient and new at the same time, and it's inside of you. And what I do is help bring that out most of the time with women. Okay. But it's very important. It is like the most precious thing that I can think of. And, the world is going to come along. Like, we have to, as women, we have to be brave enough to live this evolutionary arc. Don't stop at false women's empowerment. Don't stop at like, climbing the ladders and playing the games that have been laid out for you, subscribing to that and say, yeah, I'm beating the game because I'm making a lot of money. Maybe that's okay for you, but it's not okay for me. My soul actually needed to do it very, very differently, right? And the things that I have realized on that path is literally new information for the earth. So we could say that this happens, as a creator or as an innovator or as a thought leader. I'm sure that those things are true. My way of articulating this is to say that when you say yes to your path, and when you heal what is in the way, and when you walk back toward actual template of creation and unity, you bloom. You bloom. And what is in you, this is why I'm particularly speaking to female leaders, is because you already have the template of leadership. Like, you were already made for this. You're born for this. So the world actually needs you to say yes to your uniqueness and bring that forward, because within that there could be this, intuition for an entirely different like school system. I'm sure that there is, right? I had this template about like fostering the soul in education and letting the soul lead. We have a lot of ideas. We can only do so much, but we can do a lot. Maybe you have like new templates for, you know, cleaning water, growing more food, like housing more people, fixing infrastructure, leading government, like all of these things that we currently need. We don't need women emulating the old system. We need women stepping into their truth. And yes, that pathway involves this healing of the feminine and masculine archetypes. And the biggest deal is you standing in the full creational, like sovereign truth of who you are. So I'm Sarah Poet. That is what I help with. If you are interested in working with me and speaking to me further, you can contact me via sarahpoet.com. I look forward to hearing from you and supporting your path. Okay. Blessings.